I worked as a media buyer, and on my third day on the job, my boss asked me to find some information and update the huge spreadsheet he was working on for the client's annual plan. As I was about to update it, he opened the file to finish a few things and asked me to wait. Now, I'm the new girl wanting to show service. I decide to open a copy of the spreadsheet and update it there, so when he finishes, I know where it goes. He finishes, lets me know I can open the file. I just save the one that I've updated on top of his work. I basically made him lose an entire day of work. The year-round spreadsheet was ready, and the one I had was a rough draw. I really thought he was going to throw his monitor on my head. He changed colors and had to leave the office in order not to curse me out. I apologized the next day, and so did he, and we agreed to always save versions from that day forward. Firefighters. What ways have you seen idiots literally make their lives go up in flames? In the city of Colorado Springs, the local news did a fluff piece about candle safety near Christmas. After they were done filming, the owner of the store that they were filming in took the crew out to breakfast. She didn't put out the candles and burned several shops to the ground. The film crew was there to film her breakdown when they realized what had caused the fire. I worked for a restoration company. A family cut a small tree down and tried to stuff it up their fireplace to burn it. The flute was so crammed with leaves that smoke started to fill the living room. They tried to pull the tree out, and that's when it really caught fire. They tried to pull it out of the house, and they got as far as the front door. All of them had second and third degree burns on their hands and arms, and the fire destroyed the front room and entryway of their house. The insurance company asked us if we thought it was a case of fraud, and we told them, no, these people are just really stupid. A fairly common one, but the response was interesting. Early February, Western Pennsylvania. A guy's pipes freeze on the coldest day of the year, -8 degrees Fahrenheit. He tries to thaw them out with a propane torch, and sets the wall on fire, tries to put the fire out, and fails. Finally calls 911. Fire chief is half a block away and is on scene in under a minute. The basement is fully involved, main floor catching. The first engine arrives in under 5 minutes. Doors are blocked by fire, exterior attack only. I was on the attack line, spraying water into the second floor window. After 40 minutes, another firefighter comes to relieve me, but since I'd been getting back spray, I was frozen to the ground. He has to pull me loose. 2 hours later, we've knocked it down. The insurance adjuster shows up. The assistant chief explains what started the fire. The adjuster replies, yeah, we know. It's okay. We insure for stupid. Nobody got hurt, by the way. Family got a much nicer house out of the deal as well. A teenager was charcoal grilling in the attached garage during the winter. When he was done, he decided the best place to dispose of the hot coals was into a cardboard box in front of the corner of the garage closest to the house. Yeah, it went about as well as you can imagine. I don't understand what they mean by that last sentence. Paper and its relatives are famously fireproof. That's why we make all of our important documents out of it, surely. And it's also why the narrator has a trail of single-ply toilet paper circled around his fireplace and leading into the bedroom of his firstborn child. My dad was a firefighter. He once went to a house fire that was started by the old lady who lived there. She liked to burn candles, but didn't like the wax buildup that would form in the cavity, so she would soak up the liquid wax with a napkin. She was doing this when she accidentally brushed a wax-soaked napkin up against the flame. She panicked and threw the napkin into the trash, where all the other wax napkins were. As the trash can exploded into flames, she fled the house, but not before she went to her oxygen tanks and flooded the house with pure oxygen, because she thought that it would smother the fire. Not a house fire, but really good. Late 1980s. Guy was driving an old beat-up Lincoln. He turned a corner to go up a steep hill, but the road department had recently ground the asphalt down in preparation to repave. A storm sewer manhole cover was sticking up about 4 inches. As he went over it and up the hill, the rear of his car dragged due to the pavement height difference, and the manhole ripped open his fuel tank and sparked off the gas. He described it as, I heard a scraping sound, looked in the mirror, and there was a trail of fire chasing me up the hill like I was the roadrunner. He pulled into a gravel parking lot and tried to kick a brake in the trail before the fire got there, but it jumped the gap and hit the car. By the time we got there, it was up in flames. He actually thought it was kind of funny. The only real loss was his wife's purse with her license and credit cards. The car was insured and they got a nice payout for it. I am a firefighter, but this wasn't in my district. A guy was attempting to forge a sword in a burning barrel in an alley, based on something he'd watched on the History Channel. The embers from the, quote, forge lit up the building he lived in and destroyed 3 multi-story family residential buildings. This happened in the past fall. A family had a fairy house that was outside, right next to their wooden-sided house. The fairy house was made out of an old tree and had a bunch of decorations in it, including incense candles. One evening they decided that they'd light the candles for the fairy, which then caught the tree on fire, which then extended into the house. Since it started on the outside, it ran up the side of the house first and got into the attic and second floor. The family was home, but in the first floor while this was happening. It wasn't until someone driving on the road saw the smoke and went to alert the family that they realized. Luckily, we were able to save the structure. There was a bit of damage to the roof, attic, and second floor, but the homeowners are rebuilding those areas now. In college, a girl in the dorms was making popcorn, which, not sure, but somehow caught fire in the microwave. She didn't want to get into trouble for it, so she grabbed the flaming bag of popcorn and threw it into the nearby trash can, then proceeded to cover the fire with paper towels to, quote, smother it. She actually thought it would work. It did not work. I came back exhausted after work to find the dorm building surrounded by fire trucks. Based on the stories of relatives, the answer is by allowing 10 years worth of dryer lint to accumulate inside the machine until it just bursts into flames. This was not an isolated case. Forgetting to close the bottom of your grill and then going overboard with lighter fluid. Oh yeah, a friend of mine in the 5th grade caught himself on fire with lighter fluid when the charcoal wasn't really starting. They used to sell extension arms that you could hook the lighter fluid can to, and he used one of those. But the fire ran up the dripping fluid into the can. No problem. He just walked over and set it down and released the holder, at which point the can tipped over. It was only about a quarter full, so only a little spilled out, but he went to tip it back up when it exploded right when his head was above it, and the burning lighter fluid covered his head. He was pretty smart for an 11-year-old. He remembered where the fire extinguisher was, ran over, pulled the pin, sprayed himself, but he still had bad burns all over his face and head. College students really are something else, man. My school is a nursing and engineering school, full of the people that will be staffing hospitals and designing the technology of tomorrow. I cannot tell you how many times I was woken in the middle of the night because one of these beacons of the future took way too much green herb and put a burrito in the microwave with the foil still on it. I mean, we had numerous people forget to add water to the instant noodle cup, but leaving the foil wrap on something is probably way worse. Oh, that awkward period between leaving high school and becoming real adults with jobs. We learn a lot of important lessons during our years in college, like what not to do in the kitchen, so that when you inevitably move into your own flat, you don't burn it down around you. Not everyone learns it early enough, I guess. It was in my local paper. It turned out to be my friend's older brother. He tried to smoke out bees in the loft and set fire to the insulation in there, and burnt the whole house down. My father was a Boston firefighter for more than 30 years. One of his more memorable stories was a foreign family who'd ripped up their cast iron bathtub and built an open flame underneath it. They used the tub as a giant oil fryer. Naturally, this didn't work out very well and the house caught fire. To add to the insanity even more, the family absolutely refused to let my dad and his co-workers in without taking their boots off, which of course they couldn't agree to. Just crazy. I was a chef before I was on a volunteer fire department for a bit, and this was at a restaurant down the street from my old one. Cooks at this restaurant forgot to plug the drain in the deep fryer. So what happened was they put oil in a fryer which drained immediately right before lunch, turned on said fryer, and that's when the coils caught fire. So not only did they spill 5 gallons of oil, burn a fryer, fill a restaurant with smoke and kill the service day, this was the second time it had happened. My uncle is a firefighter, and the answer is Christmas trees. If they dry out, they become a ticking time bomb. He used to do an annual demonstration where he'd let a Christmas tree dry out for a few months, and then he'd take it outside and ignite it. The flames would shoot 40 feet in the air and the tree would be gone in a few seconds. It was mightily impressive to behold, and I'm sticking with artificial trees. Firefighter here. One extremely cold night, the temperature was -11, with wind chills in the -40s. This guy tries starting a fire in his fireplace and couldn't get it started. He decides to use gasoline. He dumps half a gallon on the firewood stacked by the door and the other half onto the wood in the fireplace. As he attempted to light the fire, he couldn't get the lighter to work. Now the vapors are really starting to build up. He then goes to the kitchen, which adjoins the room with the fireplace, to use the stove to light some newspaper. As soon as he turned the knob on the stove, the igniter lit the gasoline vapors. The living room was instantly on fire. The vapors singed all his hair and he got first-degree burns on his hands and face. We, on the other hand, spent the next few hours in the extreme cold. Flash ahead 3 hours, now the firewood outside has somehow ignited and we have to go back. The second fire had some time to really grow. In the middle of the night, everyone was in bed with no one around. The longest, coldest night of all my life, all because some fool decided to use gasoline to start a fire indoors. I set my parents' bathroom on fire while getting up from the toilet. My mum used to leave potpourri simmering in a small bowl on the back of the toilet with a candle to heat and stew it just below. As I was getting up, I somehow knocked the apparatus off the back of the commode. We had carpet floors in that bathroom, and that section of the floor caught pretty quickly. The fire then found a seam in the wallpaper and ignited the glue fairly easily as well. As the flames rose, it caught the roll of toilet paper on the way up the wall, which really accelerated things. All of this took less than 30 seconds, and I remember being somewhat mesmerized at the path the flames traveled. I also remembered that I'd flushed the toilet before realizing what had happened. I somehow thought to grab the toilet bowl brush, shove it into the commode to get it wet, and then beat out the flames. The aftermath was surprisingly minimal. The small section of carpet was destroyed, but my parents replaced the carpet everywhere a few years later. The wallpaper wiped clean with some hot water and a rag, and thankfully there was only a little permanent smoke damage on the ceiling, which has seemed to fade over time. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. Mid-80s, near the beginning of my career. A young lady finished putting flea spray on her pupper when she noticed a tick embedded in its flank. You ever hear of the tick removal technique in which you blow out a match and touch the hot tip to the tick, thereby causing it to back out of the dog? Yeah, the dog caught fire. The little fellow ran under the bed, which also caught fire. The lady grabbed the pup with the flea spray still on her hands, and they too caught fire. Long story short, the house was a mess, but both the lady and the dog fortunately survived with moderate burns. There was also the lady who tried to sanitize her panties in the microwave, but thankfully I was off that day. Family friend decided to make major renovations on their home with no background in construction or carpentry. They also didn't bring a professional to ensure that their renovations were up to fire code. Lo and behold, an exposed wire sparked a fire in the middle of the night and burned down their entire home. They have 3 kids and are very fortunate they were all able to escape the fire without any injuries. To make matters even worse, they had no house insurance. Extreme libertarians that didn't believe in insurance or debt. So they ended up having to rely on a GoFundMe fundraiser, set up by a relative, to recover financially. Last I heard, they were still living in a hotel, trying to figure out their next plan of action. The story alone reaffirms my belief that some things are better left to the professionals. Even if you're trying to cut costs, it might be best to pay a little extra to have someone with experience do something for you instead. This avoids terrible situations like this. See, there are a lot of things the narrator will slog through and do a terrible job at in order to save money. Things involving high voltage are not on that very long list. The same with flammable gases. Yay! My $50,000 in materials house went up in flames within 5 minutes of me turning the lights on. That would be the title of my newsletter that week. This one happened in my building. In India, generally you have a small praying place in your house, like a little version of a temple, a shrine. You light a lamp every day and pray there. In this particular case, the family decided to keep this thing on a fricking refrigerator. The lamp fell behind the fridge due to wind from the window adjacent to it. The condenser caught fire and literally exploded. The whole floor was then on fire. Luckily, no one was home. It was a really dumb decision to keep a temple on a fricking fridge. This one happened in a certain mall here in Monterrey, Mexico. We have a Freaky Plaza, a little mall where all the geeks, gamers, and otakus go to, and on the second floor someone was smoking while playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And since he didn't want to throw his ashes on the floor and the trash can was far away from him, he decided to make a paper ashtray. Yeah, that didn't work out well, especially when 3 of his friends decided to use it as well. So, here in Argentina we have El Cordero a la Cruz, basically cooking a whole lamb with an open fire. And well, it just so happens that pines are really flammable. And if you make an unprotected fire in a floor covered in pine leaves near a blooming pine, well... Ooh, I have 2! The first is that once my neighbor stole 15 propane tanks and decided to make a DIY blowtorch. By neighbor, I mean he lived below us. We were giving him our basement. He almost lit the house on fire, but then he tripped on something and fell over. The next morning we looked and saw it had burned a little bit, but not much. He was also very drunk that day. And the second was that once we lived in a basement suite, and the people who lived above us were making toast at 2 a.m. And they used a fork to get it out, but the fork hit something, so the toaster caught fire. And my mum tried to wake me up. But I just pulled my blanket over my head and said, I just want to sleep a little more. And then my mum said the house could burn down, and I was the first one out of my house. My neighbors forgot they had ferrets inside. We grabbed our dog, but they didn't grab their ferrets. The fire department came, but my neighbors could have put out the fire if they unplugged the toaster and put baking soda on it.